Donald Trump has just ordered the Department of War to prepare for possible military action in Nigeria.
The US won't invade Nigeria without this.
We have no fear of whatever Trump is doing. Let them come.
Imagine this. On a drowsy Tuesday, a senior analyst in a US defense facility stops cold while pursuing intelligence files. He reads it twice. We have an issue. Why? Washington's planners are suddenly alert because Nigeria just declared that it is capable of producing and deploying combat drones, firearms, and armour designed for African battlefield, just days after Donald Trump openly alluded to potential military action in Nigeria. This is more than simply a narrative about guns. It's a supply chain revolution that has the potential to change a $20 billion economy and completely transform Africa's international relations. I'll explain what Nigeria just accomplished, why the United States is concerned, and the implications of Africa's future. Stay tuned. You would have probably laughed if someone had told you 3 months ago that Nigeria, yes, that Nigeria will upend the entire world's defense sector. Nigeria, the nation that experiences frequent currency crises, the one that while terrorists wreaked devastation at home, waited 7 years for America to deliver fighter jets, it was the same Nigeria. However, everything changed in April. Nigeria declared to the world's army industries, we don't need you anymore, in addition to showcasing new technology. Furthermore, the events of that day transcend military strategy. It is a momentous occasion that may change the way Africa interacts with the outside world. It all started in a little Abuja government facility. Let's go back to 2014. The north of the nation was in disarray. 276 Chibok schoolgirls had just been abducted by Boko Haram, a tragedy that garnered international attention. The world's response to Nigeria's desperation was limited to sympathy and hashtags. What then did Nigeria do? It tried to purchase a security much like many other threatened African countries. Within 18 months, the United States pledged to send Super Tucano aircraft valued at $600 million. 7 years later, they showed up. Terrorists also took control of areas bigger than some European nations during the protracted wait. While Nigeria's money remained inert, they dominated towns, wiped out lives, and uprooted millions. However, purchasing weapons as an African nation has always been about dependency rather than merely technology. Unwritten terms are frequently included in the agreement. We will sell to you, of course, but you will back our UN candidate. You will let our businesses into your economy. You won't become overly self-sufficient. Why must every bullet cost us a piece of our sovereignty? Asked a former defense minister. Imagine having to get your neighbor's approval each time you repair your own fence. That has been the reality of Africa. But change is bred by necessity. Thus, what appeared to be a typical Thursday morning in Abuja turned historic on April 3, 2025. Nigeria debuted the Danza attack drone, which was developed and tested solely on Nigerian territory, but was neither licensed nor imported. It was well summed up by General Christopher Musa. Nations that don't build their own will always face diplomatic delays, even when they can pay. In a world where global politics makes it harder for countries to access advanced defense systems, the Danza drone is a message as much as a machine. It was designed for Nigeria's unique condition, which include wetlands, where oil thieves operate, dense woodlands, where bandits hide, and intense heat that frequently renders imported technology inoperable. It is outfitted with real-time satellite communication, precise targeting, and 14-hour flight endurance. The Dancer drone is 60% less expensive than imported versions and is ideal for Africa's environment, in contrast to Turkish or Chinese models that were made for their own climate and wars. To put it briefly, Nigeria created freedom rather than merely a drone. The twist, however, is something the headlines totally overlooked. While the world's media focused on Nigeria's svelte new drone, the nation was covertly developing something far more disruptive to the defense industry as a whole, as well as to geopolitics. Consider the AIB Group, one of Nigeria's emerging defense producers. They currently have more than 1,000 employees, but their approach is what sets them apart. Not just their number. The majority of the developers and engineers don't work in offices. Working closely with soldiers in the field, they get personal knowledge of the breaks, what functions, and what is required. Nigeria has been observing, learning, and adjusting in the same way that Ukraine studied drone battlefield tactics against Russia. And now, those same nimble FPV drones that transformed Eastern European warfare, Nigeria is manufacturing its own version in addition to tactical equipment and weaponry. They even created a DG-103, a domestic variant of the AK-103 rifle, and they currently produce bulletproof jackets and armored vehicles just within their borders. A few years ago, Brigadier Chufu, an EIB officer, made a statement that seemed absurd. Nigeria's security is no longer dependent on any other country. That would have been written off as wishful dreaming 5 years ago. Right now, the outcome speaks for themselves. Nigeria's economy was severely damaged in 2022 when the country lost over 100,000 barrels of oil every day due to theft. Today, oil output has increased from 1.1 million to 1.7 million barrels per day, while losses have decreased to barely 5,000 barrels per day. Is it a coincidence? Perhaps. However, it is difficult to avoid making the connection when military reports begin to cite Nigerian-made weaponry in successful operations and commanders discuss force multipliers and enhanced capability. The world's defense industry started to fear at that point. Imagine discovering while playing chess that your opponent has been using a completely other set of rules. Nigeria just did precisely that, because more than one nation is involved in the development of weaponry. It concerns Nigeria posing the query that keeps defense contractors up at night. What happens if we are no longer needed in Africa? Reports from the meeting of the African Chiefs of Defense Staff show something startling. Other countries are giving Nigeria directives in addition to praising their advancement. Why? Because Nigerian weapons are costed in local money, adapted to the topography and climate of Africa, unrestricted by foreign or political conditions. Nigeria can respond to security threats more quickly, eliminate diplomatic delays, and maintain control over its supply chains by producing drones and weaponry domestically. Compare that to the following options. American machinery. You will pass human rights audits after years of waiting. Chinese armaments. Prepare for unforeseen circumstances. Russian technology. Only if you get along politically. Nigerian systems. Just pay, don't wait, or engage in politics. Now, picture yourself watching Africa's $20 billion yearly arms market gradually shift southwards towards Nigeria while seated in a defense boardroom in Washington or Beijing. You would listen. Quick. This is where things get even more intriguing. Nigeria is portraying itself as Africa's own arsenal rather than merely attempting to replace international suppliers. What happens when Ghana discovers that Nigerian drones outperform imported ones in the humid climate of West Africa? Or when Kenya finds out that amid the dust and heat of East Africa, Nigerian-made equipment outlasts European models? The global powers are truly alarmed by the sudden disintegration of the long-standing monopoly of foreign defense providers. The actual question, though, is why can't others do this if Nigeria can? In actuality, legal manufacturing weapons is one thing, efficiently utilizing them is quite another. That's when the difficulty starts. Bandits in the north, pipeline thieves in the south, and terrorists in the northeast continue to pose serious internal dangers to Nigeria. All the anticipation turns into costly spectacle if these domestic weapons don't produce tangible outcomes on the battlefield. Early indicators, however, indicate otherwise. With the use of domestically produced drones, Nigeria military have begun to more effectively identify and destroy terrorist camps. The governor of Plateau State even declared that these new drones have made its area safer. The most notable twist is that robbers themselves have been caught in possession of AK-103 rifles built in Nigeria. Consider this. The enemy wants to utilize the exact weapons designed to destroy them because they are so successful. However, the main important question remains: what will happen if Nigeria were to truly succeed? What happens if the nation uses its own technology, independent of outside assistance, to beat crime and terrorism? Every African country will then begin to pose the same question. Why can't we defend ourselves with homegrown weapons if Nigeria can? The political global defense order may be turned upside down by that one question. A lion doesn't borrow claws, as the saying goes. What if Africa made the decision to create its own? Imagine a unified African defense environment, not simply Nigeria, an alliance formed for invention and production rather than war. Imagine that each African country contributes a mere 1% of its GDP to a collective defense development fund, resulting in an annual budget of $20 billion dedicated only to security innovation, manufacturing, and research. Regional hubs then focus on their areas of expertise. Nigeria concentrates on drones and small arms. When it comes to designing armored vehicles, South Africa is a leader. Their MRAPs are already of the highest caliber. Egypt is in charge of defense and aeronautical engineering. Morocco is an expert in digital warfare and cybersecurity. Africa can negotiate on equal terms with countries like Brazil, India, and Turkey using this model, partners who want to compete rather than dominance. The result? A self-reliant Africa creating its own defense system, supported by African money, driven by African goals, and fitted to African circumstances. Does that sound ambitious? Perhaps. However, Nigeria has already demonstrated that the concept is effective. It demonstrated the ability of an African country to successfully develop, manufacture, and implement cutting-edge military technology. The true test now is whether other African governments have the foresight to recognize what Nigeria saw and the guts to take action. Because, let's face it, there are strong interests that profit from maintaining Africans' reliance. They are reluctant to give up. The continent is currently at crossroads. Africa remains a consumer via waiting, borrowing, and being reliant. Inspired by Nigeria's success, the alternative route turns Africa into a producer, establishing its own power, laws, and futures. Many African countries still lack the political guts to separate themselves from Western control. They continue to purchase foreign weapons, constrained by conditions that restrict their sovereignty, under pressure from influential suppliers, and entangled in reliance. The outcome? A continent that is nevertheless vulnerable, dependent, and under the authority of outside forces. However, there is another route which Nigeria has daringly chosen. A route where nations start exchanging technologies, developing domestic defense industries, and attaining true security independence. Imagine an African that produces its own security solutions in addition to self-defense. It's obvious which of the two options is superior. However, the unsettling reality is that authority is threatened by change. The global arms business didn't forfeit a $20 billion market after building decades of connections and influence. These seasoned gamers will fight back to keep Africa reliant. They will make up myths about how independence is dangerous or unattainable, provide better deals, and instill fear. Nevertheless, there is a cause for optimism. African-made solutions are required to address the continent's deteriorating security situation, which includes internal instability, terrorism, piracy, and climatic conflicts. Tools that genuinely address this reality can only be created by individuals who experience them. Nigeria has demonstrated that independence is achievable. The question now is whether the rest of Africa will be willing to follow suit. This is your chance to pose challenging questions if you are African. Why don't our politicians make investment in homegrown defense production? Why do we still bargain for our safety with people who take advantage of our fears? You have a role if you belong to an African diaspora. Encourage engineering projects, defense startups, and African IT innovators. Your investment has the potential to ignite a continental revolution. Additionally, keep in mind that this isn't about military might if you're observing from a distance. Redefining Africa's position in the world is the goal. When Africa develops its own security, it no longer requires authorization to defend itself. When Africa produces its own defense technologies, it is an equal and does not submit to anyone. Nigeria's achievement has exposed a potent reality. Technology, skills, and resources are already available on the continent. Whether Africa will eventually make use of its resources or keep depending on those who profit from its reliance is the sole unanswered question. What are your thoughts? Are we seeing the emergence of a new dependent Africa that is spearheading its own defense revolution, or will internal opposition and the established power maintain the status quo? If this altered your viewpoint, please share it with someone who needs to see Africa's narrative from a different perspective. Please leave your opinions below.